Hello and welcome to Quartic. This is episode 3 in our series CFA Level I, 10 Topics in 10 Weeks. The topic for this week and topic number 3 is economics. Economics accounts for 10% of the questions in the exam and covers both micro and macroeconomics. The good news is if you have studied economics before, it's broadly the same content. If you've never studied economics, you will need to spend some time getting familiar with the vocabulary of the subject. The first reading is all about demand and supply, so you will need to know the demand function, price elasticity of demand, look at the demand curve, the shape of the graph, and also how elasticity changes as you move along the demand curve. If you can calculate income and cross-price elasticities of demand, that would be great as well. And on the supply side, understand total, average, and marginal product of resources. Know your revenue and cost definitions, so things like total revenue, marginal cost. Understand the basis of firms producing at the point where their marginal cost is equal to their marginal revenue. So that's the profit maximization point. And finally, be familiar with things like the break-even and shutdown points and short and long-run economies and diseconomies of scale. The next reading is the firm and market structures. So this reading looks at different levels of competition, ranging from perfect competition all the way through to monopoly. So you need to know the characteristics of each firm's structure, as well as whether they can make profits in the short run and the long run. So for example, when it comes to perfect competition, you need to know that there are many buyers and many sellers. The firm is a price taker and therefore faces a horizontal demand curve. There are no barriers to entry or exit, and the products are all identical. With perfect competition, short-run profits or losses are possible, but not in the long run. So the similar sort of thing you'd need to know for monopolistic competition, for oligopoly, and also for monopoly. The next reading is Aggregate Output, Prices, and Economic Growth. This is where the content moves into macroeconomics. You should understand GDP in terms of its definitions, so expenditure versus income, and also its calculations, the value of a final output, and also the sum of value added. You should also know the algebraic expansion of GDP, so GDP is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Also know the shape of the aggregate demand curve. Now you're going to come across a very detailed section on the IS and LM curves. In the wider scope of the curriculum, it's actually less important than other areas, so I wouldn't waste time doing lots of detailed derivations of these curves. What's probably more important is to know the various aggregate supply curves, so your very short run aggregate supply, the short run aggregate supply, and the long run aggregate supply. Also be able to describe macroeconomic equilibrium and know the inputs for economic growth and how they can be described with a production function. Understanding business cycles is the next topic. It's quite short. You need to know the 4 phases of the business cycle: expansion, peak, contraction, and trough. Know the various definitions and types of unemployment and how they're calculated. Understand inflation, the different types, demand pull, cost push, and also how it's measured and calculated. And in terms of economic indicators, if you can know the various types of leading, coincident, and lagging indicators, that will be quite useful for answering exam questions. The next topic is monetary and fiscal policy. So you need to know the basic definitions of monetary and fiscal policy and the tools as well. So the tools of monetary policy being interest rates and the money supply. In terms of fiscal policy, the tools are government spending and taxation. You need to be able to distinguish expansionary versus contractionary monetary policy. Also from this reading, look at things like the fractional reserve banking system, the quantity theory of money and how it works, central banks and their roles, and things like discretionary policy and also automatic stabilizers when it comes to fiscal policy. The next reading is international trade and capital flows. Again, a short reading. You need to know the motivations for international trade in terms of comparative advantage and to be able to explain the various impediments, things like tariffs and quotas. Know the definitions of the various types of trading blocks. be able to identify what goes into the balance of payments and also how it ties in with savings, investment, and the government budget. And the very last reading is currency exchange rates. Now, nothing too difficult here. In fact, enjoy the simplicity while it lasts, as this becomes far more complex when you get to level 2. So you need to know what an exchange rate is. It is the price of one currency in terms of another, and basically just understand generally how exchange rates work. You should be able to calculate movements in exchange rates and also cross rates. Look at interest rate parity and how it's used to calculate forward rates. And then finally, you need to know the basic descriptions of the various exchange rate regimes and how, exchange rates affect trade and also capital flows. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much for watching. For free access to Quartic Online Learning Portal, get in touch using the details on the screen. Also, you can follow us on Twitter @Quartic Training for access to more videos and useful resources.